Back with you tonight, you're in Focus, and thanks for staying on. The Russia-Ukraine conflict was on most leaders' lips on day 2 of the United Nations National General Assembly. The U.S. said it would strengthen its focus on food security since Moscow's invasion worsened a global food crisis that was already fueled by climate change and COVID-19. Moscow and its neighbor Kiev are major grain and fertilizer exporters, and shipments were disrupted by the conflict. Meanwhile, Rwanda's President Paul Kagame has appealed for more funds to hold acts of insurgency in the East African region. Joining us now from New York is Voice of America United Nations correspondent Margaret Besheer. Margaret, good to have you once again tonight. As if, of course, it's not enough, the conflict that is currently in Russia-Ukraine, but as the General Assembly is sitting, we hear President Putin has upped the ante, calling about 300,000 reservists, saying he's obviously escalating this battle a little bit further. Was anything said about that today?
Yes, actually, I just came from a press conference with the European Union that he's convening an emergency meeting of his foreign ministers who are here in New York for the European Union bloc tonight, and that this is an unacceptable threat because Putin was also implicitly talking about using nuclear weapons. So he said that he's trying to intimidate Ukraine and all those who support Ukraine, but he's failed at that, and that the European Union will continue to support Ukraine, and they will meet tonight to discuss it, possible new sanctions on the table if Russia goes ahead with new referenda to try and legitimize themselves in these areas in Ukraine where they've occupied. There's 4 areas that are going to probably have referenda in this weekend. But President Biden went straight into the news today in his speech. He said that Putin calling up the reservists and his threats of nuclear weapons, he's doing this in reckless disregard of his responsibilities under the nuclear non-proliferation regime. And he also condemned these planned referenda. He called them sham referendums. And he said that if they annexed parts of Ukraine, it would be an extreme violation of the UN Charter. And he said that this war is about extinguishing Ukraine's right to exist as a state, plain and simple.
So the UN Charter is what he's emphasizing, and he's saying let's stand together. That particular call, what does it tell us about the resolve of the United States in these particular matters?
Well, he said the United States has already sent Ukraine $25 billion in military, economic, and humanitarian assistance since Russia invaded at the end of February. So I think it shows that the United States is resolved to stand by Ukraine and its people, and they're not going to back down. The same with the European Union. They also said that they would continue to support Ukraine. I think Russia is going to find itself more isolated here at the United Nations, particularly if President Putin is making threats about nuclear weapons. That concerns everybody. So, countries are not going to be happy about that. We've already seen last week at a summit in Eastern Europe, the Chinese president, President Xi, and Prime Minister Modi of India both sort of expressed concerns publicly about Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and they're good friends of Moscow. So I think Russia may be surprised, President Putin may be surprised to find he's growing more isolated if he continues, with this rhetoric.
President Biden is saying no matter what else is happening in the world, the United States is ready to pursue critical arms control measures. A nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. What is he saying to world leaders here?
Well, that despite Russia's war, he's willing to discuss the nuclear non-proliferation safeguards that exist in the world. And in January, the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, Britain, China, France, Russia, and the United States, who are all nuclear-powered countries, nuclear weapons-holding, I should say, countries, they reaffirmed their commitment to not be proliferators. So he's saying Russia's going back on this commitment, and we just reaffirmed it at the beginning of this year. So it's a grave concern. I mean, when you start talking about nuclear weapons, I think everybody pays attention.
Was as much attention being paid when he spoke about the fight against climate change?
Well, the president showed that he can talk about multiple things at once. He put a lot of emphasis on fighting climate change, but also on feeding the world. The food crisis is a very big topic this week. He announced $2.9 billion in new U.S. commitments to food security. He also expressed a $6 billion commitment to replenishing the fund to fight tuberculosis, malaria, and HIV/AIDS. So health, climate, food, these are all still very much on Washington's radar this week.
I already mentioned that some African leaders were also talking particularly around insurgency in parts of the continent. What are they saying?
Well, we heard from President Buhari this morning. He spoke. One of the things he said, actually, is that the war in Ukraine is interfering perhaps a bit with tackling other issues of importance, terrorism among them, but more specifically climate change and the food crisis. So, yes, their leaders are talking about that. Kenyan President William Ruto just made his debut at the podium a little while ago, and I actually thought we heard from Madagascar's president, Rajoelina, and he was talking about electricity in his country, and I know that's of interest in South Africa right now, and he said more than 600 million Africans are still lighting their homes by a candle and by kerosene, and in Madagascar, the government is launching a program to put solar panels on homes, and they're going to subsidize this. And he said this is going to happen by the end of next year, and he hopes that they can bring electricity to most of Madagascar through solar energy. So moving in a renewable direction.
Right. And in terms of the theme, that has been taken in the continent on silencing the guns, particularly in the Horn of Africa, was there appeals made to world leaders to assist in that regard?
I haven't heard too many direct ones, but I think there's just, a general sense that the conflicts in Africa need to be settled because there's so many other issues like climate-induced drought, and food security that are really very pressing on the people of Africa.
And I see some reports indicating that the president of the Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, would also be making an address. Has that happened already, or is it still to happen?
He should be speaking in about maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours. It will be a video message, actually. He's the only leader this year speaking by video to the assembly. He had to get special permission, sort of, from the GA last Friday. There was a vote, and members of the assembly voted to allow him to send in a video message because of the extenuating circumstances of the war. But it's not setting a precedent. It's just this one time he's going to be doing this.
Margaret, I appreciate your time, and thank you very much for your information tonight and enlightening us on the happenings there at the UN General Assembly. That's Margaret Besheer there, watching very closely what's coming out of there. Yeah, in about an hour and a half, the president of the Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, expected to make that address there. This, as I put it there, the president of Russia is upping the ante, calling some 300,000 reservists to join the war in the Ukraine.